Night, good night, good night, good night. Tonight, we want to talk about debt collection, but specifically debt validation. Debt validation, what is the difference between debt validation and debt verification? The credit repair process is one that is simple but also complex. And if we understand the process, we're able to navigate it with skill and with strategic maneuvering. Collections accounts are some of the easiest accounts to actually get deleted, and they also can be a headache. As I have said in my previous video earlier this week, that collections lawsuit are on the rise, and we need to be prepared. But tonight, I want to discuss briefly, not for long, this will be a short live. I want to discuss debt validation and debt verification because there are some confusion sometimes, especially with new credit repair um, business owners and new credit repair personnel, and even with the regular consumer that is a non credit repair specialist. There's a confusion that exists sometimes regarding the difference between debt validation and debt verification. So I want to just touch on it a little bit and get into some of the nuances of debt verification and debt validation. When we have a credit report before us, it is important that we understand the context of the accounts that is on the credit report. When we get a credit report, we don't just go off in disputing. We need to understand several things that is specific to the different accounts that is on the credit report. When you understand that, we can tailor our strategy in how we are going to do the dispute. If we don't tailor the strategy in how we are going to do the dispute, then sometimes we will waste a lot of time. And in wasting a lot of time, that builds frustration. And frustration plays with our confidence. But when you understand the fundamentals that governs each account that is on a credit report, that will allow us to approach what we are doing in a different way. So when it comes on to collections account, there are so many weapons. Collections accounts have the most weapons that you can have to dispute them. But we have to understand the context of the account. And in understanding that context, we are then able to navigate the dispute with the proper strategy that is needed. When a credit report comes before us, one of the first things that we do, we look for inaccuracies and all of that sort of thing, which is okay and which is fine. But when we're dealing with collections, that is just one of the avenues that you have at your disposal. There's so many different ways to dispute that collections account. And a lot of times in the credit space, one of the first things that you are told is to request debt validation. But sometimes that is not your first and best option, depending on the history of the account. And that is why if you're a credit repair business owner or you're a credit repair, you're repairing your own credit, you have to understand the history of that account. What do I mean by that? It all depends on what went on with that account prior to it being placed on your credit report. That will determine what you begin with. In addition, it also depends on what the debt collector did prior to furnishing that account and what the debt collector did within the window that you first learn of the account, whether the debt collector contacted you or you learn about the account, which is the way many people do, learn about the account after it is placed on the credit report. Or the account can also, as I have seen with a lot of my clients at different period of time, the account can also be the result of identity theft. So if any one of those factors are true, and let me run back the factors. One, whether you heard about the account prior to it being furnished to your credit report, that's one. That's a whole different strategy. Whether the account is the result of identity theft, that's a whole nother strategy. Whether the debt collector placed the account on your credit report, and that's when you know about it. Or the debt collector was in contact with the person that they're alleging owed the debt prior to it being furnished, or just about time when they were about to furnish it. All of those things will dictate and determine how you approach disputing the collections account. If it is the case that the account is the result of identity theft, then you know that you actually go about filing an identity theft report. That is the first move that you're going to make. And you file your FTC identity theft report, and after you file that, then you end up send it in and do what you got to do. Now, if the account was placed there and it's after it's placed there, you are become aware of it, and it all depends on how long it's there from the time that you are aware of it. That again gives you a completely different strategy. So if you are a credit repair personnel and you are repairing credit, the first thing you have to do once you get that credit report in your hand, or you yourself, if it's yours and you're doing it, all of these preliminary questions must be asked and the answer to them ascertained. Upon gaining the answer to them, that will dictate what you start with. If the debt, a lot of times, I often say this, and this is true, the validation notice is the easiest thing for the debt collector to actually provide. And there's a lot with the validation notice that can lead into violation, that even if it is provided, if it is not provided a certain way, then that in itself can become a violation that you can go after the debt collector for. So the first thing that we should start with is not necessarily requesting validation, because a lot of time, if the debt collector is going to be operating ethically, which for the most part, a lot of the debt collectors are just something else, they are going to have this information. Because one of the things that the original creditors ensure that they provide for debt collector that they're doing business with, that especially those that they have forward flow agreement with, where they're consistently buying debts from them on a schedule, and they're buying for millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, they are going to provide the basic information to meet the validation requirement. So a lot of time, the debt validation is not your strongest point, because the debt collector would have had that information for the most part. The next thing, the debt collector a lot of time will actually, upon the first contact of you, send you a validation notice. A lot of time, or your client. From time by the time you see the client, that collection account is there for a while. The debt collector has already provided the validation notice. So you go into the debt collector and saying, provide me with the validation notice is a waste of time at that point, because the debt collector will just send you back the one that they gave or told you that this information was provided on X date already. As a result, it is important, as I said earlier, that you find out from that client what is the history of this account. Were you contacted by the debt collector? When were you contacted? At what point in time did you become aware of the account being on your credit report? Were you contacted prior to it being placed on your credit report? All of these questions will help you to know where you should begin. If there is no validation that was provided to the client, then you have a problem on your hand, because the debt collector has an obligation to provide the validation notice within the verification notice within 30 days, the validation within 5 days upon first contact with the client. Sometimes the first contact is that validation notice and a request on demanding collection of the debt. If that was not provided during that time, the debt collector have 5 days upon first contacting the client to provide the validation notice. If the debt collector provide it within that 5-day window, because what happened? The debt collector has a responsibility to give you that notice. When you have to demand it, it means then that the debt collector has not done or followed through with their obligation under the FDCPA. So as a result, you might have a case on your hand right there, because not supplying the validation notice is a violation of the FDCPA. It violates your right to due process. You're saying right to due process? This is not a criminal case. No, the right to due process, the validation notice is grounded within that legal framework. And that is why when we're dealing with debt collectors, we must understand the law that governs them and the context of the law that governs them. So once the debt collector didn't give you that within the window, within the 5-day window, you have 30 days, right? You have a 30-day window known as the validation period to actually request the validation notice from the debt collector. After that 30 days, you lose certain rights under the FDCPA. You lose certain rights that you have during the validation 30-day period. You have a lot of rights, very powerful rights, and you request the verification. The verification request is different from the validation request. And you should not just allow the debt collector to send you a validation notice and reckon that as verification. Verification is based upon paperwork. Verification is a request that you are making for the debt collector to establish the truthfulness of the claim that they are making that you owe them. The word verification comes from the Latin word for truth, veritas. It's related to that word. So a verification request goes beyond the validation notice. Validation is certain basic fundamental information the debt collector must give you. The debt collector must give you the name of the original creditor, how much is owed, date of delinquency, all of those basic stuff must be a part of the validation notice. One of the things that you should stick on the debt collector for if you are going to request validation, make sure that the debt collector give you an itemized breakdown of the debt. Most of the time, the debt collector is not going to be able to do that, because when they buy the debt, a lot of time They don't get the breakdown of the history of the debt. They just get a digital file with your name, your phone number, your address, email address at some time if that is available. And they also get the total of the balance. Sometimes that balance is incorrect. This is why you have to ask the debt collector in your validation request for an itemization breakdown. They're not going to be able to give you that. And the itemization breakdown should include the principal, any interest, any fees, or any other thing that is stacked on that spells out how they arrived at the total number that they're requesting. Those are the things that you should be requesting in your validation request if you're going to make one. If you don't make a validation request, then the verification request becomes something that you have that is very powerful. And this, you must make use of what comes with the verification request. You don't just ask for simple things. Ask for things that the debt collector is not going to be able to provide. This is how you should go about doing your debt validation. Debt validation is the basic information. Debt verification is more information than what the debt collector provided in the first presentation that he gave. Once you make a verification request, the debt collector must provide you with that information. The debt collector cannot tell you that they're not providing it. If they do that, it's a violation of your right. Now, in the verification request, you must not ask for the same things that you have asked for in your validation. Or if you're going to ask for those things, you must ask for a substantiation of how the debt collector comes by that. All right, that is the difference between the two, and that's what you must do in order to do a proper verification and validation request. All right, this live is a short one. Peace.